Food and foodways has been an important and ever-present aspect of human lives and medias. Despite wars, disasters, plagues, alien invasions, and other apocalypses, we living humans still need to eat. In fact, we think about food all the time. From mundane questions of what are we going to eat today into imaginary ones like how does Mars-grown potatoes taste like? Whilst scientific researches provides answers to real questions, fiction provides possibilities to imaginary ones, whilst at the same time they also reflect our thoughts surrounding food. Writing about post-apocalyptic science fiction films, Ratzinger 2008 states that, quote, as speculative visions, they reveal the dreams and the anxieties of the present, quote end. I in turn will be using this argument and applying it to video games by asking two main questions. First, how does different post-apocalyptic game mechanics and settings depicts and handles food? And secondly, what could these games tell us about our current, past, and possibly future thoughts and fears surrounding it? To achieve this goal, I will be limiting my research to 4 video games with differing approach on these themes: Fallout 4, G.A.M.M.A mod pack for the S.T.A.L.K.E.R game series, Starfield, and Raft. And to contextualize these games, I will be referring to 4 main ideas: the interplay between story and mechanics in Fallout by Sarah Stang, Agata Waszkiewicz's deep dive into food and video games, Julia Kristeva's theory of abject, and lastly, epistemic violence coined by Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak. This differing multi-perspective reading on different games should answer my goals to offer a broad base into researching food in post-apocalyptic game environments. As one of the most prominent post-apocalyptic media series, Fallout provides a popular entry to our discussion. In a recent article by Sarah Stang, she applied a couple of methods when looking into specifics of the game. She begins by quoting Laura Forster to base her ideas, followed by a summary description of the Fallout series before delving into food and foodways in video games in general. She then quotes Ratzinger and describes how in the series pre-apocalypse food functions as an anchor to what was known, before explaining its purifying role. And whilst she mentions a plethora of items, she focuses on 2, the sugar bomb cereal and nuclear quantum. The design and the ingredients of both food items refers to a heavily militaristic, capitalist, and techno/nuclear-centric culture of a fictional USA. Unhealthy food choices were being promoted into public consumption by drawing into techno-military imageries. She then discusses how the ever-present radioactivity in the post-apocalypse leads the player into either dependence of drugs or mutations to eliminate radioactivity, turning the player characters into a sci-fi, quote, transhumanist intertwining of nature and technology/synthetics/biochemicals, quote end. She ended this chapter then by remarking the connection between pre- and post-apocalypse, quote, with the pre-war culture so obsessed with atomic power that they would put a radioactive isotope in their soft drinks. It is perhaps no wonder that the future America that Fallout envisions is one of irradiated wastelands, warring factions, and mutated monsters, quote end. The next 2 chapters drive these horrors even further by examining mutated beast and insect meats, a nod to Kristeva's objection against polluted food, and how cannibalism is depicted in the series. Most importantly, however, is her closing argument. Reiterating the end statement of the 2nd chapter, she returned to Ratzinger's and other authors' ideas. As a fictional media, food in Fallout reflects upon our own conditions by placing them in imaginary but not unrelated settings. Each of the apocalypses and the food and foodways afterwards are grown out of our current fears and concerns, from nuclear Armageddon, forced exodus into the stars, or even a worldwide flood. Post-apocalypse therefore provides a fertile ground to ask about our physical and psychological connections to food when the world as we know it has come to an end. Some of these questions can again be seen in Grok's automated modular modpack for anomaly, or G.A.M.M.A, as a modification of the S.T.A.L.K.E.R game series. made by the Ukrainian G.A.M.M.A. The game series might have not depicted the apocalypse as an Earth-covering calamity. Instead, it focuses on the imaginary aftermath surrounding the Chernobyl nuclear reactor incident. And like the base game, the mod pack has a survival mechanic, requiring players to eat and drink to stay alive. This also meant that imported, packaged, and preserved non-irradiated food, whilst limited and expensive, is available alongside the more common irradiated meats that the players, like in Fallout, could harvest from mutated beings. This survival mechanics coincides also with Waszkiewicz's idea of food being an oppressive force and at the same time promoting tough masculinities. In G.A.M.M.A, players are incentivized to loot killed human and non-human enemies for both food items or sellable objects to exchange, among others, for food, due to the non-existence of plant-based food from inside the zone, as is colloquially known for the game world. This does not only lead to a mainly carnivore foodway, but also one that borders cannibalism. One of the base game enemies, the S.T.A.L.K.E.R, can be butchered in the mod pack to gain multiple body parts, one of which is its edible hands, making it the only confirmed edible mutated human. Combined with the fact that S.T.A.L.K.E.s are quadrupedal and, unlike Fallout 3, cannibalism in G.A.M.M.A is not directly sanctioned, this raises an interesting question about, referring back to S.T.A.L.K.E.R, what is considered edible and what is not. Somewhat interestingly, the game's item description also mentioned that most human NPCs avoids eating S.T.A.L.K.E. hands, citing moral reasons, but bandits and mercenaries, two factions connected with organized crime and monetary gain through questionable ethics, eats them to show supremacy over other factions. This mixture of moral indifference and obsession with one's own progression, part of the game mechanics, fits back into this hypermasculine idea of survival. Progress is gained by removing one's own moral and or objectifying others to differing degrees. And by others, I did not only mean objectifying S.T.A.L.K.E.s, but also the two cannibalistic factions. The item description can be read as creating an unabridgeable difference between the two factions and the rest, including the factions that the player might take, showing them in a negative light. Cannibalism, therefore, is not only the objectification and desecration of mutated humans, but also those who ate them. These aspects of othering can also be seen when looking into post-apocalyptic game from a post-colonial perspective. Whilst games set in the late 20th century are still set in a certain geographical boundary, usually in Western countries, they also reflect the already post-colonial norms of the period or are indirectly citing happenings outside the game world. Coincidentally, food seems to be one of the more direct ways to show these themes. In G.A.M.M.A, dried nuts are described as being grown in Brazil. In the Fallout series, cows are called Brahmin, Chinese in turn molded the term Yao Guai, and Fallout 4's most prominent noodle-selling robot repeats a Japanese phrase. This idea of food globality in turn affects much more the world building of contemporary or futuristic post-apocalypses, with Bethesda Studios' Starfield being one prime example. Set in a future where Earth is no longer habitable, food again serves as an arena where comforting nostalgic post-colonialist earthen values came in contact with the yet-to-be-mastered or tamed strangeness of the universe. Both aspects can be seen in the categories of food in the game: fresh fruits and vegetables, and packaged food as both ingredients and ready-to-eat meals, or craftable or purchasable meals. And whilst the source of fresh produce is highly unknown, a list of companies puts at the very least a name on the packaged foods. 3 of them are especially interesting since they also sold highly processed, culturally thematic foods: Canucks Canned Canadian Foods, Oishi's Instant Japanese Foods, and Chunks selling and directly serving foods of unknown ingredients in the taste and looks of Americanized fast food in restaurants all over the universe. And although Chunks is the only fast food restaurant in the universe, there are also 2 other companies with on-site locations: Terra Brew serving coffee and Tranquility serving, as the name refers, tea. And if you find it somewhat hilarious that even after Earth is no longer habitable, humans still went to such length to get its daily dose of coffee, you would be laughing at the fact of the globalized postcolonial foodways cited by Starfield. Beginning with TerraBrew, we see an almost monopolistic company that sells ready-made, synthesized, European brewed coffee. Its singular competitor, Coffee Lux, might offer coffee grown by select farmers, but players are still barred from knowing its business fairness whilst still being served again Europeanized products. This way, the drink or bean is completely profanized. Its connection with colonialism and our own contemporary regional developments and also global injustices are being replaced with unquestioned Europeanized standard. Whilst coffee is there to be mindlessly served and consumed, Tranquility contrasts this not by its products, but by its company structure. Being the daughter company of one of the strongest megacorporations of the universe, the Ryujin Industries, players do not have an extended interaction with Tranquility. Instead, they can take part in a side story for Ryujin, where players have to commit corporate espionage and sabotage before being tasked to find out about problems surrounding the megacorp's most recent project of temporary mind control. This fact, combined with the stylization and lore of the company, meant that Ryujin, and to an extent Tranquility, is framed as dangerous other, making the consumption of tea equally morally questionable. Whilst tea and coffee exemplifies the contrast between integrated submission and stranger danger through the lens of almost monopolistic companies, food items shows more about the erasure of identities and lost knowledges that went along with the exodus from Earth. For a game that depicts humanity without Earth, Starfield shows a surprisingly global yet still small option when it comes to food. And whilst this can be explained as technical limitations, it also fits into its setting, where most of the words food and foodways are no longer accessible. And whilst the lack of food is not explained as a story, extinction is a plausible explanation. After all, the cereal brand Chocolate Labs are shaped, quote, like an extinct canine called a Labrador Retriever, quote end. So the extinction of other species, including plants, is a probable argument. At any rate, the game does not include a lot of plants aside, interestingly, a few that is common to Western foodways. Though in our case, more important than the extinction of species is the extinction of knowledge. Starfield's cooking is a result-based mechanism, so to create a food item you need a generalized component, an understanding about its cooking methods, unlocked through the gastronomy skill, and your cooking station will transform them into the standardized result. So, for example, players can use plant membranes and carapace as nutrients to create a xenowurst. This meant that the knowledge of the end result is more important than the preparation method or availability of ingredients. The latter is bypassed by categories of ingredients, meaning that the inability to replicate different kinds of food is based on the extinction of its knowledge, both in oral or written form. In this case, we see an indirect result of epistemic violence not shown in the game. Despite the appearance of persons from different earthen cultures and nationalities, knowledge pertaining to cultural foodways was inexplicably lost, with the select few remaining arguably being shaped by a contemporary Western foodway. And whilst there are still many ways foodways in Starfield can be examined, for example through intersectional reading between gender, class, and race, it can be concluded that in Starfield, the post-apocalyptic post-earthen foodways is still very Western-centric by choosing, erasing, and rewriting global foods and foodways. Now for Starfield, I have argued how game mechanics and story-based reading of a post-apocalyptic game can be seen from a post-colonial perspective. As a dessert, I'd like to apply a similar method to answer the question, can survival post-apocalyptic food be cozy? Again, I'm referring to Waszkiewicz's book and their idea of coziness, how it impacts food in-game and its soft border towards mainly masculine survival games. Now, soft border is the operative word here, since in no term did they draw a hard line between the two genres. For me, it just meant that post-apocalyptic survival can be cozy, for example, in Raft. Developed by Red Bit Interactive and finally released in June 2022, Raft takes place in a water world devoid of humans where players act as a forward scout, so to say persons sent on a journey on rafts made out of scavengeable materials from the sea or from the pockets of land that can be found in the game. The interplay between seafaring and land exploration is a key game mechanic since both complements the availability of resources and food. Early game stuffs like beets, potatoes, and fish can be found by gathering stuffs from the sea, whilst middle and later game ones requires island exploration, like for fruits and their seeds, and also the materials to grow said seeds. Again, hunting enemies, animal taming, and trading. This is then interloped by the presence of a constant danger, Bruce the shark, that attacks the player's raft every 5 real-world minutes, or whenever players jump into the water. Despite this, both attacks can be either mitigated by in-game objects or completely changed and disabled before starting a game. The cycle of expanding, securing, and consuming is a hallmark for a lot of games, and also feeds into 2 of the 3 points of cozy games according to Waszkiewicz: safety and abundance, with softness as a third point that is more aesthetically related. Applying these logics on Raft's food mechanics, we see that safety, abundance, and especially progress goes hand in hand. Whilst at the beginning the relatively small size of the player's raft, the very basic tools, and the absence of food makes it not a cozy game, in the later stages, bigger and more protected rafts, better tools, plots, and items for farming and even ranching mitigates these active dangers. This is further supported by the absence of ludic danger when it comes to food. In comparison to G.A.M.M.A, plant-based food in Raft offers an almost perfectly safe option with neither poison or spoilage and infinite reproducibility. The absence of human NPCs, which players only meet after finishing the story, also meant no competition for these resources. Especially the later one can be read as a contribution of the apocalypse. On the other hand, playing multiplayer meant that resources have to be shared, reducing abundance, and differing interests comes into contact, reducing safety. In this sense, coziness in Raft comes through safety and abundance that are not only created by the players, but also comes from the elimination of danger through the game's post-apocalyptic story. To close my presentation, I'd like to check up with the main points of the 4 course games that I've served today. Starting with Fallout 4, S.T.A.L.K.E.R provides a solid base into researching the themes of the post-apocalypse, where food items and foodways were read as both part of the setting or lore, as well as the game mechanics. The modpack G.A.M.M.A offers another look by limiting its geographical frame and having a survival mechanics, antagonizing food by putting players into difficult choices: expensive but healthy, or cheap but unhealthy. G.A.M.M.A's carnivore tendencies also leads to how cannibalism functions as a method of othering. Starfield then rockets us into the distant future, where knowledge kept, lost, and produced meant violence in the epistemic levels. The erasure of coffee's colonial past, vilification and othering of tea, and the presence of contemporary Western-based foodways and tastes reflects on our current globalized trends. Returning back to Waszkiewicz, Raft provides a plausible mixture between coziness and survival in a post-apocalyptic setting by, among others, removing challenges coming from the contact with NPCs or other humans. Now, these are just a few select games and methods where the crossroads between food and post-apocalyptic settings can be examined. Other games such as State of Decay, Project Zomboid, Might and Portia, and Sandrock, Green Project, and arguably Cyberpunk 2077 all provides different perspectives into both themes and a view on our past, present, and future, and also our thoughts and fears about food and foodways. I hope this talk is just the beginning, or even better, the apocalyptic event that lead into more research in this area in the future.